All right, so here we are today. It's mid-June, and we're taking this big pile of leaves and twigs and stuff, and we're going to hopefully turn it into some nice rich compost for our garden. And compost is just broken down organic matter that it would normally happen naturally in the soil, but because the conditions are right, it happens a lot more rapidly, you know, in just a couple weeks as opposed to like over a season or an entire year. The reason you want to compost is because it helps change the characteristics of your soil. It allows it to aerate better and allows you know, it to dry out and breathe. It doesn't let too much water build up, but it also holds moisture. But it also adds a lot of fertility to your soil, you know, adding like natural organic compounds into what would just be dirt so that your plants can live. So what is compost? Compost is, it's just basically like what we have here. We have a big pile of trees that we've put through a wood chipper, and after you get that pile, you're going to go and you're going to start adding nitrogen, and you're going to use those two compounds to break down each other. So what could you use for what is known as browns or carbon-rich material? Well, you could use trees, you can use twigs, cardboard, paper, pretty much anything that you would recycle in terms of paper products into your recycler, you can use instead of sending down the recycler. You can, your egg cartons can be composted, you know, egg shells, coffee grounds, and what would be nitrogen-rich stuff that you would use to break down those carbons? Well, anything like leftover table scraps, like salad stuff and coffee grounds. You could also add just like a regular organic fertilizer that's high in nitrogen. You wouldn't need a lot of, like, you know, grass seeds or horse manure and stuff like that. All right, so once you get the pile going, you're kind of going for like a 50-50 of carbon products to nitrogen products. So literally like a 5-gallon bucket of leaves, or you know, wood chips, to like a 5-gallon bucket of like food scraps or coffee grounds, and then that's like the first step. And once you get that 50-50 composition going, then the next, you know, the real step begins. And I'm going to hand it over to mad scientist Tyler, and he's going to kind of explain, you know, what that next step is.
All right, so what we got here is pretty much a big pile of nutrients. And right now it's a mixture between carbon and nitrogen. But if we were just to use this as a compost, it wouldn't really work that well. It's got to develop organisms to break down the nutrients even further. It starts out with like bacteria and fungi, and then it moves up to worms and potato beetles, and then it slowly goes up to centipedes and even bigger beetles. And so what those organisms do is they break down the nutrients even further, and it allows the plants that you're going to use the compost for to absorb it better. Alright, so as the organisms start to multiply, even from the bacteria stage, they start to produce heat. And as your nutrient pile or compost pile becomes more populated with other insects and other creatures, it starts to accumulate heat, which allows it to break down even further. So you want to look for around the 110 degree to 140 degree range of your compost, and if you know, if your compost is too cool, that means that there's not enough organisms in there creating all that heat.
All right, so there's a couple different ways to compost. So you know why you would compost, how composting works, and to set that up right, there's two different ways. There's heap composting, which is what we have here, and when you're dealing with big piles, you can just make it as big a pile as you want, and then you start adding your nitrogen material as you see fit. But if you're at a home and you're dealing with smaller amounts of composted material, you could do something wrong pretty quick. So you want to do what's called layer composting, and this is going to ensure that the materials are added in proper proportions. So your first layer, you want to start with about a foot of brown material, you know, your leaves or your wood chips, and then on top of that you want to put, you know, another foot of like nitrogen. And yeah, you're right, you do not want to you don't want to mix them, you want to leave them separate. And then also with with smaller home composting bins, you want to make sure you're getting the bugs and the, you know, the funguses and the bugs and like the centipedes, potato bugs and stuff like that in there. So you're gonna want to go and buy a bag of like an organic compost that has that already in there to add to your pile. It doesn't have to be much. You can go buy the smallest amount, the cheapest amount, and throw it in there. And probably when you open that bag, you're gonna see some of those bugs. You're gonna see the funguses, like the white powdery mildew that's indicative of good compost piles. All right, so I'm gonna tell you what we're doing to our pile. After you get your pile of carbon and your brown material, you're gonna be like, okay, where am I gonna get an equal amount of, you know, high nitrogen material? And so what we've done is we've gone to a local coffee house and they've given us all their grounds for the day. This bag is really heavy and it's gonna work great on our pile. The next part we're gonna add is we went and picked up some organic fertilizer, and it's just a 444, so there's 4% nitrogen in it, soluble nitrogen, and it's also really good because this one actually comes with bacteria in it. So in it there's 23 million colonies of nitrospolucium, and there's also mycorrhizae in here and different some other different bacteria. So this is really, I really like this because, you know, you get your nitrogen, but you're also getting some of the bugs that you might not see in a compost bag that you'd buy at Home Depot. But also we've taken all this horse bedding, and there's horse manure in there. We're gonna put that into our pile too. So hopefully that's gonna be enough nitrogen rich material to start breaking down this pile so that, you know, in a couple weeks we can use it in our gardens. We'll put a thermometer in there to read the compost pile to tell us how it's doing. And depending on what the temperature is, if you have a high compost temperature, like let's say in the 140, 150 range, you don't want it to go past 160 because then you'll be killing all the bugs. So 140, 150 is good. If it starts getting too hot, spray it with water, turn it over. If you're in the 140 range, your compost pile is going to turn and be done in just a couple weeks. You know, 2 weeks, 4 weeks is a very short time. If you're running, you know, colder climates have a harder time keeping it high, you know, they're looking at like a month to 2 months for their compost pile, about 110 degrees. So hopefully this much nitrogen and the heat of the Arizona sun is going to help us turn this pile over in just a couple weeks.
Stop the beat. Drop the bass.
Let